विवेकानंद सूरये सच्चित् सुख स्वरूपाय स्वामिने तापहारिणे। My dear Swamijis, dear faculty members and my dear students, it is wonderful to be here this morning and to speak on a very nice subject. I think I have promised a very big thing because it is not easy to present these ideas in the short span of a lecture here. But let me tell you, the title is within quotation mark. Stay alive all your life. This is the name of a book which has been written by Norman Vincent Peale, a very famous writer on positive thinking. This book first came into being maybe in the year 1957. After that, it has inspired people throughout the globe, but later on, the modern psychologists, those who promote positive psychology like Martin Seligman, criticized the approach in this book. They say the problem with this book is that it highlights too much the aspect of positive thinking. But positive psychology should take care of or include within its scope negative thinking also. That is a great contribution by Seligman and Csikszentmihalyi and such other people who promoted this modernist positive psychology. So negative thinking also has a place in our psychic framework. I would like to look at this idea from the standpoint of Vedanta and the Yoga Sutras. Yoga Sutra is the Hindu psychology, and Swami Vivekananda calls it the science of religion. Now, the first question comes, are we not already alive? That you say, stay alive all your life. Are we not already alive? That's true. But look at what Swami Vivekananda has said. He, in his famous letter to the H.H. Maharaja of Mysore, he wrote, "My noble prince, the life is short. The vanities of this world are transient, but they alone live who live for others, and the rest are more dead than alive." We are alive, but maybe some of us are more dead than alive. And this has a proof, because when we face challenges in life, we sometimes do not have the courage to prove that we are alive to our moral standards. We are alive to our own being inside that sets the standard of morality. We are not alive to our social duties. Therefore, this title is justified. Now, I would tell you that this title does not promise any miraculous solution to our problems. Swami Vivekananda hated miracles. But then we can perform miracles by our own acts. Miracles, as we understand, are like things which we can buy from the market and use them for our own purposes. But we can make miracles happen if we work that way. So that is the idea behind this wonderful caption or title of this book. And to make things happen, we need to work ourselves. We need to labor hard. And that is what we generally don't want to. That is why we need miracles. So I would just very quickly go through one idea which is very much essential to our understanding this topic, and that is the idea of the Guru. I am using this word Guru with lot of conviction. In modern day context, the Gurus are called the guides. In every field you have a guide. In Germany, in our retreat center, we call a Reinigungsfirma. They say Reinigungsfirma means a company which is responsible for cleaning houses. Since that retreat house is meant for public purposes, then it should be cleaned by some authorized firms, and they are expert in cleaning houses. One person comes from that company who holds a master's degree in cleaning, in sweeping cleaning. He holds a master's degree. That much organized is the system in Germany. And under him, at least two, they call Lehrlinge or novices, who are doing their bachelor's 3 years course, practical training in how to clean houses, toilets and other things. And there we can see that they have a guru who holds a master's degree and who teaches the students, and he is authorized to issue a license. Therefore, Guru is there everywhere. But this word has been misunderstood because of three factors. In Western psychology, they say, in the West, people are egoistic. That is why they don't know how to obey. That is the word they use. They don't know how to obey. And that is why we are averse to the idea of having a guru, a guide. But without a guide, you can't have a certificate. In India, you have truck drivers. They used to be the handymen, and they become, suddenly overnight, they become truck drivers. To become a truck driver in Germany, you have to spend a fortune like 5,000 euros. That much is the discipline there. So Guru is a necessity, but because of one factor that we are becoming more and more egoistic, we don't want to be obedient. We don't want to obey. That is number one. Number two, the Gurus themselves misused the privileges. They wanted to not to guide but to control. That became a big problem slowly. That is why we are averse to this idea of having a guru. In Indian context, we do not promote that idea that the guru will control the life of the student. Here the guru is one who guides. There are two words. One is called Acharya, another is Shikshaka. Shikshaka are theoretical scholars, they teach us theories. A management guru will teach us how to manage. But look at the family of that management guru behind. This person does not know how to manage that small family. These are the realities. But the Acharya is one who teaches through practical examples. There are many nice things in the Taittiriya Upanishad about this. At the convocation, the teacher is telling, Satyam Vada, always speak the truth. That is a big, big challenge for us in this present age. Dharmam Chara, apply those truths in your life. That is what is called dharma. Behave that way. Swadhyayama Pramada, always be up to date. Go on studying, be up to date. And then afterwards the Guru himself says, Yani asmakam anavadyani karmani tani sevitavyani no itarani. He says, you have observed us, lived with us. You have observed that in some respects we fail to be equal to the teachers. But they are exceptions, they are not rules. There for every rule there is an exception. They have to be accepted that way. Do not follow them. Do not follow those examples. They are not examples, they are exceptions. Follow those where we accept. Here he is speaking the truth. Therefore, this is a teacher whom we will follow without question. So this is the second point, that the Gurus themselves misuse the privileges. And third thing, commercialization of this faculty of being a Guru. That's what you see in the West. Everywhere. Gurus from our country go there just for commercial reasons. That is why people are hesitant to trust any new organizations. When we came there first, people were doubtful about our performances. With a lot of suspicion, they looked at us. So we have to prove that we are not one like those people who come here for commercial purposes and exploit people. These are the three factors which are the contributing factors which brought bad name for this word Guru. But it is a very effective word, because in modern day context, in various fields, you will see that we are using this word Guru, management Guru, that Guru, those Guru. Sometime back I read an article written by one management professor, and the title of the business professor, title was Liberating the Corporate Soul, as if the corporate has a soul and it needs liberation. So the word corporate, a soul, and liberation, these are being used because they are effective. So the Guru word also is effective even today. But we need to understand that a Guru is just a guide, not a controller of our life. That is a big problem in the West when we try to promote this idea of the faculty of a Guru. So we need to be guided by someone. Now sometimes you may ask, where should we get such a Guru who will be able to guide? Like Swami Vivekananda came to Sri Ramakrishna and asked a question, sir, have you seen God? So if we go now to somebody and ask this question, would we get the same answer as Sri Ramakrishna gave? No. This question was asked to Ramana Maharshi. Somebody came and asked Ramana Maharshi, sir, have you seen God? Maharshi looked at him and smiled and said, my dear child, I am not Ramakrishna. and you are not Vivekananda. This has happened once. So Einstein will never think that somebody who is better than him should be his teacher. He became Einstein afterwards. But he had his teachers who were not Einsteins, or not bigger than Einsteins. But people who have got some practical experience in any field, they are able to guide people who are just novices. The problem happens when we learn many things through internet. Google something, then you understand a lot of things. One of the doctors, German doctors, told me, she is a very famous doctor there, she told me, Swamiji, problem with patients, with those patients, that they surf the internet, know much about their disease and their treatments, and after that they come to us, and whatever medicine or thing we prescribe, they are very much doubtful about the effects of those medicines, because they are already educated about this disease and its cure. This is a big challenge for the doctors. Doctors are trained. They know how to separate. They know how to narrow down the field of inquiry or investigation and prescribe medicine. We are not trained. Therefore we go on reading things and getting more and more confused. So there is a necessity of a guru. Then next point I will try to highlight that yes, we need a guru, but for what? And there I come to directly to this subject, that we address the problems of our life, not only the problems of our life in our jobs, our professional life, but the whole life as it is. That is a big question. In the West also I have seen that they are very, very advanced in respect of professions, in respect of technology and other things which help us to have a very comfortable life. But every one of you know, two people cannot live together. That is the case. Because they don't know how to adjust with each other. Because they have a big ego. They have a personal space. That is a big problem. You don't know how much space that person has. So you cannot intrude upon that person's personal space. That is a kind of limitation. We make ourselves limited and call us individuals. We divide ourselves into so many things. Our mind is there somewhere in my clothes, in my utensil, in my drinks, etc. Mind is scattered everywhere, but still we are individuals. Swami Vivekananda mocks at this word. He said, and your individuality. It's such a big word. So, they have this limitation, and we are becoming more and more attracted to this idea of individuality. Means we are making ourselves more and more limited. Now the idea of life is that it is unlimited. Why? Because there is a nice saying by Ralph Waldo Emerson, American poet and writer. He has written that life is beautiful like that, the poem goes, and he has written, but the grave is not the goal. From dust thou cometh, to dust returneth, have not spoken of the soul. The destination or goal is not the grave. If it is, then we know what we are. We are nothing but people running towards that goal, which is just the grave. But life is not like that, because we don't want to be limited that way. Therefore, the Taittiriya Upanishad offers a wonderful definition of what is the goal. The goal should be beyond the scope of a journey. But the journey helps us to reach that goal. If I am driving from here to Moilapur, suppose, fix that goal and start driving, what am I doing? Aimless driving, spending the fuel, spending our energy. At the end of the day, what have I done? What have I achieved? Where have I reached? So if life is a journey, as Emerson says, then what is the destination? There must be a destination, and the journey should justify that destination. And we don't find any destination which is unlimited, because we want always to be more and more limited and limited and limited. Our own personal space makes us limited. Taittiriya Upanishad offers a definition to this goal. Wonderfully, it says that the goal should be the highest. Brahmavid apnoti param. Param means the highest. And what is highest? Brahman is the highest, it says. I will explain these words. And afterwards he says, what is Brahman? Satyam, Jnanam, Anantam, Brahma. Brahma is the truth, Brahma is knowledge, Brahma is endless. And that is what is called Brahman. Shankaracharya says Brahman is which is unlimited. But then how is it unlimited? No, it is free from limitations. That is what is unlimited or infinity. How is that? It is not limited by space, time, and vastu paricheda means the object limitation. Space limitation means when I am here, I am not there. Not there, not there. So I am not everywhere. I am at one place, limited by the space. But suppose something which is the reality, it should include everyone. And it not only includes everyone, it should be infinite. And that is what includes everything. And it should include me also. I cannot stand aside and try to define infinity. Infinity is not definable by me because I am part and parcel of that infinity. I can't stand aside and look at the infinity and have an experience of that infinity as my object. It is not possible. It defies logic. So, infinity is that includes me, and therefore there should not be any space limitation. That is what is called Brahman. That is what is called the reality. Just look at it. You will see that we are not speaking about spiritual things, but we are speaking about modern science. Second thing, it is not limited by time. Limitation of time means something has a beginning, something has an end. We have a beginning, we have an end, therefore our life is limited. But suppose something which is not limited by time, then that thing should be eternal. We have seen that Brahman is omnipresent because it is the infinity, now it is eternal. Actually speaking, we are all product of time. Vedanta says, if you remove time from anything in this world, that thing does not exist. That is time limitation. We are product of time. Kalu hi jagadadhara, the scriptures say. And kalu jagad bhakshakaha. And everything will be resolved into the womb of time. Because time itself is created. It is not eternal. Eternity does not mean unlimited time, it means beyond time. And that is what is called the reality. And it should be beyond our grave. And then the third thing is vastu paricheda, limitation, like being an object. It is very simple. A is A. The concept of identity. A is A, not B, not C, not D. A is A. So, to be limited by the concept of an object is to exclude everything. To exclude everything. A is not anything else, but it is A. But suppose there is something which does not exclude anything, that thing becomes infinite. That thing becomes reality. Nothing is excluded from the scope of infinity, the reality. That should be the goal. That's what we want. We are not happy with limited, suppose enjoyment, limited enjoyment. How much enjoyment do I need? When do I need it? Monday? Tuesday? No, I need it every day, unlimited. So like that, our concept of infinity is already there. That is why we don't want to die. And even if it is the truth that we will die one day, it is very difficult to accept that truth. We want to get rid of our suffering. Why? Because suffering is not our nature. If it is our nature, we won't like to get rid of it. The nature of a blanket is that it is made of wool. And if you remove all wool from the blanket, what remains? So the blanket will never want that the wool should be removed from it. Therefore, by this it is proved that our nature is not suffering. Our nature is happiness, peace. So here we find that infinity is the goal. But what type of goal? Is it a material thing? No. Then there is a wonderful equation here by the philosophy of language that if I say there is a toy, the toy is the glass, is the microphone, is toy is not the glass is not the microphone. They exclude each other. They are limited. But what is there which runs through every one of them? And that is the is. Toy is, glass is, the microphone is. Is means existence. And this existence is infinite. And we too are infinite because we are conscious. And we are conscious of our existence. That is what you will find from the atheists also. They say that we became humans, Homo sapiens, from the day we asked the very vital question about our own self. Who are we? That question we asked. That is why we are called wise men, Homo sapiens. What is our wisdom? We can ask a question about ourselves. And here is the question we ask, who am I? Am I a dead dull matter? Or am I conscious? I am conscious because I know I exist. My existence is a conscious existence. I know that I exist. If 7 billion people on the face of the earth prove that Swami Ganeshananda does not exist, that does not eliminate my existence. Because I exist on my own right. And I am the proof of my existence. And I am prooflessly evident. Even if 7 billion people can prove that I don't exist, but I can prove that I exist because I am prooflessly evident. My existence does not require somebody else's confirmation. It just requires that I know that I exist. That is my right. And that is the goal. And that should be beyond the grave. And therefore life becomes a journey, a fruitful journey to a destination which is beyond the grave. Sometime back you must have heard the name of the book. This Sam Harris, one of the 3 famous atheists in the world. One of them was Christopher Hitchens, he died some 2-3 years ago. And Richard Dawkins, the famous writer of The Selfish Genes, God Delusion and such other books. The evolutionary biologist in Oxford. And the third one is Sam Harris, the neurologist. He has written a book, Waking Up. And in the beginning he has written a letter, how to be spiritual without becoming religious. An atheist writing like that. Now they can't deny the existence of this truth in them because that is self-evident. We don't require any proof that we exist. So that should be the goal. We want to know ourselves, who we are, Do we transcend the scope of this limitation that we are born and we are dead one day? We can't accept this. We can't accept this because if we accept this, then we pick out all the wool from the blanket. Who remains? Therefore, that is the goal. And if we fix a goal, then life has a meaning. Then because life has a destination. Where to? I am driving, but where to? That question has been answered. And also, why? Why am I driving to that? This question also has to be answered. And the psychologists throughout the world, spiritual personnel throughout the world, they are trying to tell us that you can solve your problem. You can solve this mystery by yourself. And there are a few ways. From our childhood, we went on listening to these sermons that you must be good. You must be studious. You must achieve some points so that you can get an admission in the IIT. Like that, so many things we have heard. Lot of big sermons about life also. But have we ever been given a very nice blueprint how to achieve these things? Steady your mind, concentrate. Have we ever been told how to concentrate? Concentrate, we have heard thousands of times, but nobody has said how to concentrate. The Yoga Sutra has given an idea, and I sometimes hear these things from some people nowadays, and they don't acknowledge the source. Maybe they don't know, and it can be true that the same kind of truth can be discovered by different people at different times at different places without having reference to each other. That is also possible because truth is universal, it is nobody's personal property. But this I knew from the Yoga Sutras and Indian psychology and Indian Vedanta, that they say how to concentrate. Not only concentrate should be an instruction, but that we know how to concentrate. So one gentleman, he asked people in the audience to just look around. So I would request you to look around and see how many red things you see here. Just count yourself. Just look around and take just half a minute's time and just see how many red things you see. And now you tell me how many green things have you seen? Yes, that is the truth of our mind. In our mind there are so many different kinds of impressions. Impressions, they have got different colors. One color is called greed. Another color is called jealousy. One color is called love. Another color is called delusion. Like that, so many varieties of colors are there on the blackboard of our mind. Different colors are there. And there they exist side by side. But we can't see them all together. If we see them all together, then it is a big confusion. But if we concentrate on that red color, we can count them, we can concentrate on them. In spite of the fact that there are so many different colors, they are existing side by side. So to work on, suppose our anger, we need to concentrate on that. But what way? If I want to get rid of anger and then I become angry every day, then will it help? No. Suppose I want to love others, but then there is another color in my mind which is the himsa. Himsa means cruelty. So I am cruel also. So I get rid of this cruelty. Then the Yoga Sutra would say that practice ahimsa, that you do not injure others. Ahimsa by itself is not a big virtue. Of course, in today's world, even you do not injure others, that itself is a big virtue. But ahimsa is not a virtue. We have to practice just opposite of himsa, which is called love. And that is the idea which these modern positive psychologists are trying to bring home to us, that we should be taking care of our negative thinking also. I want to get rid of this, so I will practice something which will eliminate that. If I want to get rid of my anger, I want to work on that. I will tell you one story. One of our friends, she is a psychiatrist. She came to me and she said, Swamiji, I get angry very quickly. I am a psychiatrist at home. I have my training. I should not get angry. I should listen to all the problems of my patients. But sometimes I get so much angry. Then I asked, how long do you remain angry? Then she said, well, if I get angry 2-3 days, it takes me to get rid of that. I said, then okay, you practice this thing to get rid of anger. Try to practice simple thing. Try to practice that tomorrow I have a meeting and I may be facing some challenges. So today in the evening you start practicing. Whatever happens, people will try to provoke me, but I should not get angry. I should not get angry. I should just practice it. It is so easy. The next day you sit there and you become a wise person and you behave that way. People are talking things, nonsense and things going on, you don't get angry. But that way you can get rid of this anger. After almost 6 years, this lady reported back to me. She is in constant contact with us. She is a frequent visitor. She said, Swamiji, you remember you told me how to get rid of anger, but it did not work. I have been practicing that, but it did not work. I said, wait, just tell me what is happening now. You get angry quickly? She said, yes. Then how long does it take to become pacified? She said, yeah, 2-3 hours. 2-3 days 6 years ago has become 2-3 hours now. Have you not achieved anything? She is a psychiatrist. She immediately found the point. She said, yes, that is a big development, improvement. I said, see, if you want to get rid of something, you want 100% success, you have to hit the head. It is not possible. The enemy is very strong. That fellow will hit you on your head. Therefore, you try to reduce the length this way, and slowly 10%, 15%, 20%, at the end, that person becomes so weak that you hit. At one blow, it will go. These are the practical things which we learn. And there are some ways how to achieve these things. I will just give you 2 ideas. There are so many ideas, but 2 are very important for our own journey in this life, whatever you may do. Everything is included. You are not deprived of anything. That is sure. You are not deprived of anything in this world, in this life. But everything should have their meaning. Should be directed towards achieving the goal, and that way the whole thing will get a meaning. The goal is never disconnected from the journey, and the journey is never disconnected from the goal. So 2 things to highlight. One is the time. It is to the credit of Shankaracharya that he highlighted this aspect of time. And in a small verse, Bhaja Govinda, very beautifully he has said, Kala Kridati Gacchati Ayuhu. Time is equated with our life. If there is a purpose in our life, then our time is measured in life scale. And if there is no purpose in life, then our life will be measured in time scale. That is the truth. We think we have 2 hours time, let us kill this time. But we don't know, what am I killing? I am killing my own life. 2 hours from my own precious life is being killed by me. Am I working wisely? We try to While every time. Whose time? Time is very much relative. Suppose two people, one will be hanged on the seventh day and another will be married on the seventh day. How does the time pass for both of them? The person who is eagerly waiting for the day will see that the time is not going, that seventh day is not coming. So marriage is being postponed like that. That person will feel. But the person who is going to be hanged on seventh day sees that every day it is sunset, every day it is sunset. This is very relative and related to our life. That is why it is relative. Do we want our life to be like that? So that is a big question. Utility of time is a very big thing in our life. If we are not serious about this, then we don't do justice to our own self. It is not doing any harm to anybody else, not to time even, but it is doing harm to ourselves. Be up and doing, that is the word. We should learn. For everything there should be a meaning. And time has a big meaning that this is nothing but our own life. Time does not exist beyond this concept. And the second is that practicing concentration. We must try to do that because it brings us back to ourselves. We don't want to justify things looking at others, blaming the situation, blaming the space, blaming the time. We try to look at ourselves. What way I should behave? What way I should justify this life? That I am in a journey and this journey has a destination. Am I really looking at the destination? They say that all roads lead to Rome. Is it? Some roads are leading to Moilapur, sociality. What about that? All roads are not leading to Rome. Therefore, there is an adage. All roads lead to Rome provided Rome is our destination. Otherwise, some roads are leading to Moscow also. Therefore, we need to concentrate on ourselves. We need to concentrate on this life itself, on this journey itself. Am I really doing justice to my life, my life's aspirations, my life's goals? And all the small aspirations should be connected with the highest goal, which is beyond these physical limitations. In the book, Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl writes, always he thought there is the goal beyond the burned electrified wares of the concentration camp. And that kept him always alive. And then he found the meaning in suffering. Suffering should have a meaning. And that helped him to remain sane. And that helped him to discover this logotherapy. So we should always look beyond the limitations. And then our life will have a meaning of a journey, and the journey will become meaningful because it has a goal to offer. Rabindranath Tagore, in one of his very famous poems, he has written that suppose during my journey I take a halt, breather. We do. When we drive along the autobahns in Germany, we have exits. Ausfahrt, they say. We go out there. We have every right to go out to refresh ourselves, drink a cup of coffee. And then again you begin with the journey because it is not yet over. Rabindranath Tagore says that when I am on my way and I take a breather, still the idea that I have not reached the destination should keep me haunted. That I have not reached the destination. And that is the connection we need. And therefore then only the life will have a meaning. And then only we see that everything has its place. Nothing is denied. We are never deprived of anything. That is a wrong concept. We think that if we take up spiritual life, we lose many of our enjoyments. But what is enjoyment? it is a relative concept of enjoyment that we have. Your enjoyment is different from my enjoyment. So it's enough for me now because time is up, but I will give you time to ask questions. I'll be happy to answer them, but I think the questions should be related to this talk. Thank you very much.